Yeah, let's do it.
Sanders patiently running. Sanders, good cut. And another block. Sanders still going inside the 40.
NFC East champs. Divisional champs. NFC champs. And world champs.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Victory Green Hour as the Philadelphia Eagles are now 4-0, the lone undefeated team in the National Football League, as they have coming off of a victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars, 29-21. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, we wanted to see if the Eagles and Jalen Hurts could come back from adversity. And down 14-0, scoring 29 straight points. I think it's safe to say that they passed test number one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the next test is, and we don't make the schedule, but face that adversity against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Green Bay Packers or the Buffalo Bills and see if you can pull that out again. But for now, I mean, given all the excuses I see on Twitter, especially from a salty Dallas Cowboys fan base, this win was a lot bigger win than anybody wants to give it. And for the people who continue, like Haason Reddick said, we played in the same weather. How come it's us that have to have the excuses against us and not the Jaguars? Because we both played that same weather, and the Eagles just happened to start slow and then absolutely dominate the remainder of the game. So all the excuses that are coming out, it's honestly getting old. And I know that we've been the ones to kind of show some of those excuses in prior episodes, but I mean, look who we faced. I guess we had the right to. Now, this was a team who was like a top team against a much improved team, top team against the rush. The rush dominated when they needed to dominate. The defense dominated the offense, even though Trevor Lawrence was looking like Trevor Lawrence, the first pick overall that everyone thought this generational talent was. Then we shut that offense down completely. And we're going to dig into the injury aspect of this, but injuries are no excuse for the Jags because we lost our starting left tackle, our starting cornerback. We lost our starting right guard. We lost the list goes on. So whatever they're missing, a cornerback, a couple wide receivers is nothing when you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, that
both sides
doesn't even include Jake Elliott, who and it didn't affect this past game, but they did sign a kicker today, which could affect the game coming up in Arizona, which we'll talk about on Friday. But, we don't make the schedule. The Eagles don't make the schedule. You got to play who's in front of them, and you're right. There's a bunch of fans of other teams, notably the Dallas Cowturds, or Cowboys, I should say, that, they say, oh, your schedule's easy. I'm pretty sure coming into the year, didn't Dallas have an easier schedule than the Eagles? I
actually think it was the Commanders, the Giants, and the Eagles who had the easiest schedule, and then they were like 25th out of 32 teams. So they don't get off by saying, "Oh, your schedule's so easy." We were all in the bottom, like 4th or 5th of the league for strength of schedule. So there's you can't roll the dice one way just because your strength of schedule was this much better than ours by like whatever the two teams. Because the Cowboys won the division last year, right?
Yeah.
So they would have got the two stronger teams from whatever the NFC and the AFC divisions that we faced. So obviously they got slightly superior talent there, but not even enough to put them in like outside of the bottom 10 in the NFL.
All I know is that in 2 weeks, all the talk is going to be over. They're going to play a game. The Eagles and the Cowboys are going to play a game, and we'll see what happens in that first matchup. But let's talk about this Jaguars game. Jalen Hurts did not have his best game, and the Eagles were able to adjust, move into the run game. It was really bad weather. Like, it was just raining. Hard rain, really windy. You saw the one extra point by Jake Elliott. It was right down the middle and then just curved off to the right. It was crazy how windy it was. The Jaguars jumping out to a 14-0 lead on the strength of a pick six by Andre Cisco. And then Jamal Agnew, of all people, really had himself a good game for the Jaguars at the receiver position. And, before I think the one thing we both said on Friday, I know I said it, is the Jaguars are going to come out and play for Doug Pederson. Doug Pederson coaching against his old team, the team that he won a Super Bowl with, as a statue out in front of the stadium or outside the stadium. You know, you knew that they were going to come out playing tough for him. But the one thing you can't predict is how are certain players, how are teams going to play in bad weather. And Trevor Lawrence really did struggle when it rained. Like, he fumbled the ball 3 or 4 times, lost a couple of them. Haason Reddick had 2 strip sacks. On 4th down on one of the plays when he fumbled, and he had a chance. If he didn't fumble, he could have ran for a first down, or he had somebody open down the field that he could have passed it to. You know, there are the bounces that sometimes don't go your way. And last couple of years, they may not have gone the Eagles' way, and this year they just seem to go the Eagles' way, at least in this past Sunday's game.
Yeah, and that's just the way some of the games go. You have to have this expectation that eventually the games are going to go your way, or the feeling that the games are going to eventually go your way. And that's definitely what happened this past Sunday. I mean, not to take anything away from the Eagles and how hard they worked, and that it just say, it was lady luck being on our side. No, they played hard. Miles Sanders played really good. Jalen Hurts played really good, minus the pick 6 early on. That was probably his worst decision of the game, and he paid for it. And then he never made a decision that bad again for the rest of the game. It was him really trying to force a ball in there that didn't need to be forced in there. And to make matters worse, he threw behind the receiver. So at the end of the day, while we can go on about the pick 6, and I know a lot of people were tweeting, I thought, I can't remember, but there was a lot of people who were retweeting that highlight, and it was way too early to be talking smack that early in the game, especially in a weather game like that. We admit it was a bad decision, but he definitely made up for it down the line. AJ Brown had a massive game. Dallas Goedert had a really good game. Devontae Smith, while not an amazing game, he had an effective game. Like, both considering the weather, to have your top 3 wide receivers go 5-7, 5-6, and 3-4 is actually really good. And 1 drop between the 3 of them, that's really good, especially given the weather conditions that were there.
And that was a big drop by Goddard too, because that was a touchdown if he didn't drop it.
Absolute massive drop by Dallas Goedert too. But I mean, and one thing that stood out to me, and because of the run game aspect, and I know that it was mostly a Miles Sanders game, but I'm gonna say it, and I was very critical of this guy last year. Trey Sermon deserves a play over Kenneth Gainwell.
I think he deserves to play over Boston Scott. He deserves to play over Boston Scott, not Kenny Gainwell.
I think it was what he had. Let's see. So Trey Sermon, he had 2 attempts and he had 19 yards. Kenneth Gainwell had 5 attempts for 19 yards. But he was also not very effective in the pass game, which is where we need Kenneth Gainwell to be effective, because that is what we brought him in for. But Trey Sermon, for the very, very limited opportunities that he was given on 3 snaps, and he got 2 attempts and averaged 9.5 yards per carry, he definitely needs to get more of a look, I think. And maybe it was just the luck of the draw of that game, and he had got some good breaks, but we know this offensive line is really, really good for the running backs. So I think that Trey Sermon can be extremely effective. And at the very minimum, like you said, he should be in there over Boston Scott.
I think eventually he'll end up being the number 2 back. He got here late, I think right before the regular season started. So, like, he's got to learn the playbook, obviously, and like learn how the offensive line blocks, communicates. But it was also tough to take Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell kind of off the field a little bit. They were both being semi-productive. Gainwell scored this past week, but you're right. Like, Sermon, when he got on the field, had his opportunities. He made the most of them. But I want to talk about Miles Sanders, career high in carries, career high. I think that was a career high in yards, tied a career high. When the Eagles needed him, he answered the bell. He answered it, and that's the one. I think one thing we always had questions about when it came to Miles Sanders was, A, can he stay healthy, and B, will he be able to stay healthy if he's giving the amount of carries that he was being given? And they just kept feeding him the ball. And he was patient. Like, he's such a different runner this year. My only thing is, it's a contract year, so I'm kind of not surprised that he's performing that way. My worry, if they were to give him a contract, were to bring him back, does he continue this type of play like next year, like where he's already got the money and he's not going to be playing for a new contract, or does he go revert back to how he was a couple of years ago? But for the moment, for what they needed, man, he was really, really good on Sunday.
Extremely, and he was the best pass catching back as well. He had 2 receptions on 3 targets for 22 yards. Like you said, just to share some numbers, 27 for 134. That's a 5 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, 80 yards after contact, including 6 missed tackles forced. That was just an extremely efficient game on the ground for Miles Sanders. And like you said, we both I know when we were talking about it on Thursday, I said, I don't think this is going to be a Miles Sanders game. This is one of the best teams against the run. I don't think that Miles Sanders is going to be able to have a big game. And Miles Sanders, you proved me wrong. I know you're probably not listening, but I mean, you forced me to shut my mouth on Sunday when I saw that, because that was extremely effective. And like you said, it is a contract year. But I mean, you look at the contracts that running backs are getting, there's not, and the way that Howie is, there's no reason to believe that he's going to get this monster contract, and Howie won't pay out a monster contract for running backs. Like, this running back free agency is massive. And I think that with this offensive line, you can easily move on from a guy like Miles Sanders, not to speak down to him and make it a negative conversation after the massive game that he had, but it is easy to move on from running backs. And if Miles Sanders is most effective behind this offensive line and doing this well behind this defensive line, and he's staying healthy this year behind this defensive or offensive line, then I think this is a spot that I would want to stay for 3 or 4 more years, get two of those guaranteed, 2.5 of those guaranteed, and just enjoy the rest of my career behind an offensive line coached by Jeff Stoutland.
Yeah, and I think the one thing about the running back position with the Eagles, and we've talked about it with other positions, which kind of has turned because the Eagles have put assets into, like, say, linebacker and safety. They don't really value the running back position, but it's not even just the Eagles. Most NFL teams don't value the running back position. I mean, the Giants made a mistake drafting Saquon Barkley. Dallas made a mistake paying Zeke Elliott.
Whoa. If it wasn't for Saquon this year, there'd be no Giants offense. So I think
they still made a mistake. They still made a mistake.
It was a rich investment. Yes, agreed. But you wait, somebody's doing it this year. Bijan Robinson, somebody is going to be paying very rich.
Off the running back, like top 5, top 10, even top 15, maybe even first round. Like when the Giants took or the Steelers took Najee Harris, I still think that was, and I love Najee Harris, still think that was a little bit of a reach.
If the guy's good enough, I think to get that 5th-year option, get him in the first round, like Bijan Robinson, and there's a couple other backs this year. I think get that 5th-year option out of them, but otherwise, yeah, you usually can let it slide.
Let's play a hypothetical. If the Eagles have the 32nd overall pick and Bijan Robinson's there, maybe, but I'm not taking him definitely not in the top half of the draft. I don't think you take a running back in the top half of the draft, but the Eagles, I mean, they're always going to be a running back by committee team, especially since they want to throw the football. It just happened to be terrible weather, Jalen struggling just a little bit. While he struggled, he still had a pretty good game. Like, it wasn't his best game. He didn't have he had under 250 total yards of offense through that pick 6, but he scored a rushing touchdown, and he was still able to get the ball, put the ball where it needed to be in crucial spots. His touchdown run, it was 4th down. Like, they went from a third, I think it was like a 3rd and goal from the 17. He was able to run the ball, get it inside the 5, and that allowed Coach Nick Sirianni to allow them to go for it. So, like, there's the key plays that don't show up into stat sheets that you don't see that make really big impacts on games.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think another thing that needs to be pointed out, they dominated time of possession. They nearly doubled Jacksonville's time of possession on offense, 39-51 to 20-09. That is massive. And I think that definitely has to be some credit has to be given to the defense, because the defense was forcing these turnovers and putting the offense in this situation, but B, to Nick Sirianni for coming out with a really effective game plan, or Shane Steichen, I guess it would be Shane Steichen, for a very effective game plan in this weather, and making sure that one of the biggest things that we talked about last week was that they continue to dominate that time of possession, take the ball out of Trevor Lawrence's hands. And when you put the ball in Trevor Lawrence's hands, he was making mistakes. He wasn't able to get into a rhythm, and he was making mistakes. He was dropping the ball. The weather was getting to him, and to be honest, I know we're going to move to the Jacksonville Jaguars offense in a little bit against our defense, but I thought that they would run the ball a lot more. I was texting a buddy of mine who's a Jags fan, and I really thought that they came out trying to force a lot versus using the run game, which likely would have been far more effective early on. But they really kind of moved away from something that they were pretty good at with Travis Etienne and James Robinson. And to see Travis Etienne as their lead rusher with 8 carries and 32 yards means that the Philadelphia Eagles did a lot of good things on defense against the running backs as well.
Yeah, and I think that had a lot to do with Avonte Maddox out, so Josiah Scott against Christian Kirk. And then Darius Slay got hurt, and he missed the last two and a half quarters of the game. So I think that's where Doug Pederson kind of gets in his own way a little bit. It's like, oh, I'm gonna throw the ball, and I don't care what the weather is. We're gonna try to take advantage of this. Josiah Scott, I mean, while he was out of position on a couple of plays, he did really well against. And I know he had help, but he did really well against Christian Kirk. Like Christian Kirk, he didn't catch the ball until the third quarter. It was crazy how well they were able to keep him, kind of just lock him up and not allow him to have a positive impact for Jacksonville on the game. But in regards to the Eagles offense, look, they've been able to win in this first month of the season. They've been able to win games a couple different ways: running the football, throwing the football, a shootout. Only scoring in one quarter. Like, they have proven that they are a really well coached team, and that they have a lot of spunk. Like, it's so hard. Jalen said it after the game. It's like, we were down 14-0. We didn't let it faze us. And it's just crazy how well this team has been able to perform. And obviously they haven't played the top tier competition, but this builds confidence going to later into the year. When you go to face Dallas, when you go to face Green Bay, and kind of there might be the only 2 good teams left on the schedule. But still, like, it builds confidence, and it allows, like, they started the season 2-5 last year. They're 4-0 right now. Like, they have if the playoffs were to start today, they have home field advantage type of deal. Like, you don't have a loss, so you have that little advantage over the other teams that are chasing you. As we get down to the towards the end of the year, these games can matter. Beat the NFC teams, obviously, so you have that that advantage over them because you have the win. So that if you have to get to the if you have to look at common opponents or look at the head to head, that can make the difference between the number 3 seed, 2 seed, or 1 seed.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all those points. And I mean, I want to throw one more thing out on the offense. Shout out to the offensive line. Of course, as always, the offensive line did a really great job. But shout out most importantly to a guy we were talking about as a starting right guard who played left tackle for 74 snaps, Jack Driscoll, who stepped in for Jordan Mailata. While we allowed 5 pressures, 4 of them being put on Jack Driscoll, this is a guy who played the right side of the line for the majority of his career so far in Philadelphia, and you boot him out to left tackle. That is a testament again to Jack Stelton.
And he was going up against Trayvon Walker, the number 1 overall pick.
Exactly. And look, 5 pressures and 1 sack. That was it. 5 pressures, 1 sack allowed against linebackers that me and you were freaking out about on the episode on Thursday. We were most nervous that of all the positions when we ran down the line, this was the one that we thought Jacksonville could take full advantage of us, potentially get after the quarterback, potentially get Jalen Hurts moving, maybe even making the mistakes that Trevor Lawrence was making based on the weather. So definitely a massive shout out. I really had to throw Jack Driscoll in there more. While the game may not have been extremely good in his favor, given that he gave up the most pressures, the fact that he did give up the 4 pressures and the 1 sack, he was the one who gave that up. That's fine to me because he got booted to a side of the line that he's barely played at, but that versatility was massive and very much needed, especially when Jordan Mailata went down. And while I know Nick Sirianni said that these guys, most of the guys who are injured, have a good chance of playing this week or have a chance to play, I really hope. I think one of the biggest ones is going to be Jordan Mailata. Making sure that Jordan Mailata can play is a huge one, but being healthy is also very much needed. If there's a team,
And he tried to get back into the game, but he just didn't have any power on his shoulder. So like he wasn't going to be effective. So, I mean, credit goes to Jeff Stoutland, coaching these guys up, and also goes to Howie because we know that they prioritize the offensive and defensive lines, and two of your starters go down in the same game, and you throw two backups in, and it's like they've been in there the entire season. Suo Opeta and Jack Driscoll. So like they deserve a lot of credit. Howie does, and obviously, Jeff Stoutland, man. I don't know what we're going to do whenever he retires. I don't want him to ever retire. I want him to coach forever. But we both know that that's not going to happen. So, like, we have to embrace having him be our offensive line coach because he is a Hall of Famer when it comes to coaching the offensive line. And
I'll put up here Benjamin McClellan's comment here. Yuppers, Miles Sanders is showing that he wants that bag of Benjamins come contract extension time. I just pulled it up on Spot Track. They have his current market value at $8.5 million. I'll tell you right now, Howie can probably work some magic to get it a little bit lower than $8.5 million. And I think the biggest thing is figuring out how to rig that contract to have enough guarantees to keep him around. Because one of the big things with running backs is getting that guaranteed money because they're one of the positions most affected by injuries. So say you can get him down into the 7.5 million range and offer him a little bit more guaranteed money, 100%. I'm all for paying Miles Sanders that type of money if he's going to be this effective behind this offensive line for the next 3 to 4 years. And I would say you're probably locking him up for 4 years, give him 3 years guaranteed. If this continues, if this season continues, Miles Sanders is one of those guys, unless you're getting him on the cheap, I do not want to see him getting a contract in season. I want to see him go the entirety of the season and see what he does. And then we can figure out what we want to do from there.
Oh, yeah. And again, we know how he likes to give out contracts during the season, but I think that CJ Gardner-Johnson's probably one that if he can continue to show that he can be a safety.
TJ Edwards should get one.
Kaiser White. Like, there are guys that should or that have the potential to get contracts over Miles Sanders within the season. Again, I'm waiting. Like you said, I'm waiting till the end of the season with Miles because we know just his history, injury history and all that. If they're able to get him on a nice contract to come back, sure. But the Eagles are always going to prioritize when it comes to the running back position. It's going to mainly be running back by committee. I do think that this past Sunday was an outlier, giving him 27 carries and all that. But we'll see it. We'll definitely see how it goes. It was look. He answered the bell when we needed it to. We needed him to. Got a couple of touchdowns. Was the bell cow, and that's what we've been waiting to see since he's been drafted. Just everybody on that offense, everybody in the offensive coaching staff, they deserve a lot of credit because they didn't get down on themselves when they went down 14-0. Now let's move over to the defensive side of the football. Again, they gave up 14 points and 7 were in the fourth quarter. But the defense got a lot of pressure. The Eagles are number 1 in the NFL in sacks. Like, remember last year, didn't they only have, I think, 29 sacks for the entire year? They have 16 already in 4 games. So the money spent on Haason Reddick, the money TJ Edwards, or the money's bringing back Fletcher Cox, drafting Jordan Davis for Jordan Davis, the sacks aren't there. I mean, he's making plays in the run game now. Obviously they got gashed the first game against Detroit, but the last 3 games they've been a lot better against the run. So I think they're in the 20s when it comes to against the run right now. But if you can't take it out, but like since that Detroit game, they've been a lot better, and Jordan Davis is getting into rhythm, and they're getting him onto the field a little bit more, so they don't have to force him onto the field. We always talked about, Nakobe Dean. He's not being forced onto the field because TJ Edwards and Kaiser White are playing really well. Well, if Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox can continue to play well, you don't have to force Jordan Davis out there to be a pass rush specialist because that's not his game. But they can put him out there in key spots when you know that the opposing offense may be running the ball. I mean, there was a play where I think it was James Robinson, or it might have been ETN. One of the running backs got outside, and who's the one that tackled him 10 yards downfield? It was Jordan Davis. So like when he's on the field, he's giving it 110%, and that's all you can ask from your number one overall pick.
Absolutely. And I posted, I shared a tweet the other day and added my own math to it. Reuben Franks had the stat there that the Eagles are the only team in the NFL with 5 players with 2 sacks. You got Reddick, Graham, Cox, Sweat, and Edwards. Also, I noted the 2021 Eagles had 29 sacks in 17 games. 4 games this season, they have 16 sacks. They're currently on pace for 68 total sacks. It's a massive number. It is a massive number.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen, but the fact that you can sit there and show, you're beating the 29. You're probably getting into the 40, 50 range.
30, if they don't beat 29 after having 16 in 4 games, something went severely wrong.
And especially given the schedule, and I know that this is more fuel to the spiteful people who are going to say, oh yeah, the schedule favors us getting more games like we just had, where we're going to have 4 sacks, 5 sacks, 6 sacks. Like it favors us to get it. No, are we going to have games where we're getting like the strip sacks and the weather playing to our favor, or like Carson Wentz where we got 9 sacks and everyone purely was out for blood with him? No, we're not always going to get those games, but you know that you're going to get some games where you can get those 4 or 5 sacks, a strip sack here, a strip sack there. But ultimately, that's all you need. We're not asking for these games where you get 6 + 2 strip sacks or 9 sacks. We want them, but we don't necessarily always need them, because there's other ways that our defense has been extremely effective. And so far, the defense has really stood up and stood the test of time. And as long as they can continue to do that, the offense can falter here and there for a little bit. But obviously, eventually there's going to be some games where the defense may falter and give some stuff up. And I mean, I know we kind of saw that week 1 against Detroit, but like you said, one of the big ones was Jordan Davis had an extremely good game. He was really effective. So that you like to see that. And only in 17 snaps. So again, he did a really good job. The missed tackles were kept to fairly at bay. They kept it to 6. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson responsible for 3 of them. Of course, he's still probably warming up to the defense, and the fact that the weather probably makes everyone a little bit more slippery. Like I said earlier, Jalen Hurts had 5 missed tackles forced, and Miles Sanders had 6. So I think a lot of those missed tackles forced kind of have to do with weather as much as skill. And then the pressures, we had 10 pressures and 3 sacks, including Haason Reddick. You got to shout out Haason Reddick for this game. He had a massive game. Finally, the coming out that we needed. We kind of started to see a little bit in the prior game and that got us excited. And then this game, it was a full coming out of Haason Reddick and why we paid this man the money that we paid him. And hopefully this is the beginning of a lot of great things to come with Reddick.
Yeah, and, he's had a great couple of weeks. The Eagles have obviously had a great season thus far. He's going to go up against the team that drafted him. This upcoming week, we'll talk about more. We'll talk about that more on Friday. But yeah, I mean, like the Eagles took advantage when they needed to take advantage. They've been, we talked about how we thought that Jacksonville would be their toughest test to point. The weather is the big equalizer. I thought coming into the game with the rainy weather that it actually favored Jacksonville because A, they were number 1 against the run, and B, I think it'd be their game plan. They would have a more run-based game plan, and we know that the Eagles are trying to force the ball, or I don't want to say force it, but try to throw the ball. And the Eagles were able to adjust right away, almost right away, and they're the number 1 scoring offense in the second quarter. It feels like as soon as it hits the second quarter, it's like, all right, let's play some football. And it's crazy how they're able to just turn it on. And obviously it's going to come back to they can't do that all the time. It might come back to haunt them. But, the one thing, and again, we mentioned it on the outside of this, we wanted to see how the Eagles answered to adversity. They were down 14-0. They didn't flinch. They didn't let it phase them. They didn't panic. They continued with their game plan, adjusted it a little from more of a pass heavy probably to a run heavy game plan. And within a blink of an eye, they scored 29 unanswered points. It was crazy. And, that being able to score the touchdown at the end of the second quarter, like that's a big play because the Eagles kicked off first. So they were getting the ball to start the second half. So, you have a chance to steal 14 points right there. And the Eagles were able to at least get 7. I think they punted on their first possession of the third quarter. But that stuff matters. That stuff, takes a toll on the opposing team. And the Eagles have been able to take advantage of that so far in this early season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the bonus point is they scored 9 points because they went for the 2-point conversion and failed. They scored 9 points in the fourth quarter. So that's a bonus to me, is the fact that they were able to go out there in the fourth quarter and actually put some points on the board, which is something we had not seen yet from the Philadelphia Eagles, was them putting points on the board. And while they were up 20-14, so technically I would say they definitely needed those points, but they were in a position where they were dominating Jacksonville and they didn't really need the points, but a field goal at minimum would have been nice to make it the 2-score game, and they got that field goal. And then the touchdown from Miles Sanders' 5-yard run in the fourth quarter was icing on top for this game. So while yes, they dominate the second quarter, and while that may not always be the case, hopefully they'll dominate a different quarter in some games. You never know. But the fact that they scored in another quarter, they played against adversity, they were able to win out in this matchup against the weather. That's huge. Like, it doesn't matter. The weather isn't always going to play into your favor. And you never know what a game would have been like if the weather was nice at this point. What we can say ifs, ands, and buts about Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars, but at the end of the day, there is no reason to think about those, because the game went the way the game went, and we played in the same weather that they did, and we were able to put up 29 points to their 21 points, and our defense was able to dominate Trevor Lawrence. Their defense was barely able to touch Jalen Hurts. But we've all played in the same weather, and we said one of the biggest things was that they could probably get after Jalen Hurts with those linebackers, but those linebackers were kept at bay. It was really an impressive game all around, despite the score.
I don't remember hearing Devin Lloyd's name. I don't remember hearing Josh Allen's name. I don't remember hearing Trayvon Walker's name. Like, I don't remember at all hearing their names. So, like, again, the offensive line, Jeff Stoutland, even they all deserve a lot of credit for the protection and just the way they were able to run block. Like Landon Dickerson is the number one when it comes to pass blocking, pass win rate, run win rate, whatever it is. He's number one of all guards in the NFL. Like, he's just doing an outstanding job as the guard. And we talked about coming into the when we drafted him, he was going to be the center of the future. And what happens? He's the left guard. He's going to be an all-pro left guard. And the Eagles didn't even have to put Cam Jurgens in the game. And we talked about how Cam Jurgens could potentially play a guard position. They went to Sua Opeta. Like, so that's how much depth is on this offensive line for the Eagles. And if, their offensive line, their backups could probably start for 25, at least 25 other teams in the NFL. Like, I know that Joe Burrow would be dying to have the Eagles' second string offensive line. Like, he would be dying to have it. And obviously they're going to be tested coming up. I mean, you got JJ Watt this week, you get Dallas, Micah Parsons the week after before the bye, then you get the Steelers. Like, there's going to be more tests coming up, but they have passed every test so far this year.
Absolutely. I mean, schedule be damned. They have passed all the tests that need to be passed. They have 115 points for. They only have 71 points against. When you look around the NFL, there are not many teams that are putting up that type of pointage at this point in the season. When they were in a shootout with Detroit, they came out on top. When they were in this messy weather game, they've managed to come out on top. They've managed to win when they needed to win. And last season, there were these games that slipped away where we should have won and we didn't win. So, I mean, you can sit there and talk about the schedule all you want, but you can only play what's in front of you. And the fact that they are playing these teams and winning is a massive bonus, because they could have lost that game against Detroit. Some of these games we could be talking about completely differently, but they're able to pull out those wins. And it doesn't matter how you do it. If you have the easiest schedule and you only lose 3 or 4 games, then you did your job well and you did your job effective, especially when you consider when you go up against the division as much as you go up against, you're bound to falter against a divisional opponent. You know that happens with everybody. So if we are able to win all the games but 3 or 4. Then the real test comes in the playoffs, but we dominated a schedule, or at this point we're dominating a schedule we were supposed to dominate, and that is not something that always happens with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time since I think it was 2004 that the Eagles have started 4-0. They went to the Super Bowl that year. That was the TO's first year with the Eagles. So, you take all the positives that you can get. I mean, they are going to face adversity. They're not going 17-0. They are going to lose a game. It's going to happen. No need to fear. Obviously, depending on how they lose the game,
Let me just. I'm gonna have to clip this out just in case we have to revisit this in week 18. I agree with you. I agree. In all honesty, I do agree with you. I'm sure there's people who think we're going 17-0, but I can't get behind. Now, I was a guy who was stuck on 10 wins and wasn't going to waver, but now I'm starting to think 11 or 12 really sounds pretty realistic at this point. And I say 11 or 12 because I feel like we'll lose it like 3 or 4, and then week 18, we're probably going to be in a situation to just rest, and that could end up a loss.
I think it's the Giants. It might not end up a loss. We'll see. We'll see how the Giants are playing. We'll see who's playing quarterback for the Giants by then. But yeah, so before we move on to the unheralded player, obviously not a surprise to us, but when Doug came out, got a huge ovation. It's like all the sports shows were like, oh my God, Philly gave him an ovation, because everybody that knows anything about Doug Pederson and his relationship with the Philadelphia fans and the Philadelphia Eagles knew he was going to get a huge ovation, winning he was the coach of the team that won our only Super Bowl. And then at the end of the game, Jason Kelce doing a jersey for jacket swap, which I thought was awesome. All the guys that had played here, Hurts and Kelce and Johnson, everybody going up to Doug. Stoutland went up to Doug. Everybody went up to Doug. It was just awesome to see that. Obviously, when the game's on the line, or when you're playing the game, he's not going to get all that love. But before the game, after the game, got all the love that he deserved.
Absolutely. I feel bad that you have to listen to radio stations that thought that Doug Pederson would not get any type of love or ovation.
Well, Philly radio stations knew he was going to get love. It's more of like the national media, that because they always bring up the same stuff. Throw the snowballs at Santa Claus, cheer when Michael Irvin. Like they have nothing new to talk about when it comes to Philadelphia fans.
This is true, but I mean, you knew that the love was going to be like this, and I mean, I'm not discounting Sirianni and the culture that he built, but you can definitely tell based on the way that they went up to the number of players that went up to Doug Pederson versus the number of players that went up to Carson Wentz and how they spoke about Carson Wentz. I think Sirianni had the basis of the culture that exists today because of Doug Pederson.
Mm-hmm.
Doug Pederson built a tremendous culture there in Philadelphia, a tremendous culture in that locker room. While, there was, the Alshon Jeffrey, the Summit and the Carson Wentz and his treatment of other players and stuff. While there are some of those reports coming out, he had the respect of 90% of the players, 95% of the players, and they played for him, and the culture was built around that 95 or 90% versus the 5 or 10% that weren't bought into it. So I definitely think that we owe a little bit there to the culture that Nick Sirianni was able to build, because some of those veterans that were there to help with that culture continue to be there today and are prevalent and important in that culture today. So I think that that's huge. He deserved that ovation. He deserved all the love in the world.
Oh, he definitely 100% agreed. Obviously, Doug's never going to have to buy a meal in this town if he ever comes back. When they have the 10-year reunion in 5 years or whatever it's going to be, if he's not coaching, he'll be here. Even if he's coaching, he'll be there. And we already know that, like the reception you get. But yeah, so it was awesome to see that. And Eagles fans didn't let the rain ruin the mojo. Like they were still out there in full force, and that's to be expected by the Philadelphia Eagles fans. All right. So let's move to our unheralded player of the week in the National Football League. It can be from any team, doesn't have to be strictly from the Eagles. And we don't want the Patrick Mahomes, even though that one touchdown that he threw was ridiculous. Like, really, who does a spin move on the field? Like, really? Come on now. He's
who does a spin move on the field. But listen, the thing with Mahomes is people are like, you don't have to do that. The fact that he can do that and he actually makes things happen is absolutely insane.
He also threw it to the running back I have in fantasy, so I was happy about that. I had Clyde Edwards-Helaire on both my teams. So, but now, who's your unheralded player of the week for week 4 in the National Football League.
I know you would never do this, and most fans would never do this. But one of the biggest things I said and felt when Dak Prescott went down was that we would be in a position to run away with this division. We are in no way in a position to run away with this division because of my unheralded player of the week this week, and that's Cooper Rush. The fact that the Cowboys are 3-1 blows my mind. The fact that Cooper Rush is undefeated as a starting quarterback absolutely blows my mind. Their offense has not looked good, and their defense has probably been one of the biggest reasons to keep them alive and in games. So Cooper Rush had a fairly good game, 50 for 27, 223, 2 touchdowns, and they beat the Commanders, which obviously we destroyed the Commanders the week before. So you say, whatever, it's the Commanders. It's a divisional game like I alluded to earlier. I hate to do it. I hate giving it to Cooper Rush, but there's so few. Like the big guys, the big names had the big games this week. It felt normal back in the NFL, but Cooper Rush keeping the Cowboys afloat and Dak being able to come back to a team that's in total control of their season.
Dak could be back for the Eagles game.
Dak will definitely be back for the Eagles game at this point. He got the stitch.
I don't know.
He was almost ready to go. He was almost ready to go this week.
If it's up to Jerry Jones, he would stay with Cooper Rush.
As much as I want to say, I don't think that's true. There's a part of me that's like, he would, until Cooper Rush loses a football game, I feel like he'd rather ride Cooper Rush.
He didn't want to pay Dak Prescott. Like, let's be real. Jerry Jones did not want to pay Dak Prescott. If he can find a way to get out of that contract, he will. But we'll see. Yeah, I would never pick a Cowboy, by the way.
I know. But like, look around. Look at the big games. Look at the difference makers. They're the guys that they're not unheralded.
So my unheralded player, yours, I'm going with Jack Driscoll and Sua Opeta. They were not expected to play in this game. 2 offensive line injuries in the first half. I believe the second one, I believe Sam Mala's injury was in the second quarter, if I'm not mistaken. But like, you obviously practice all week with the anticipation that you might play. But let's be real, like the Eagles' offensive line is pretty good to the point to where like the injuries may not happen, but they happen, and they came in. And you talked about Jack Driscoll at the beginning of this. You know, he's primarily been on the right side of the line, right tackle, right guard. He jumps over to left guard like it was no problem, like he's been playing it his entire career.
No,
left tackle. We asked Andre Dillard to go. We asked Andre Dillard to go to right tackle, and he can't even make it a half. So like, Dillard could potentially be back this week. Who knows what's up with Mailata as well? We'll see. But yeah, like those 2 guys just stepping in, and while Driscoll gave up some pressures here and there, like he still did his job. The Eagles were still rushed the ball for 50 times for over 200 yards. So Driscoll and Sua Opeta are my unheralded players of the week.
And I would say based on snap count that Samalu went down in the second half. He played 62 snaps out of 82. So I would assume that was probably a third quarter, probably even fourth quarter injury. But
yeah. So I mean, but still, like the game.
Driscoll is 100% warranted. 100%.
Yeah. I agree. But yeah, so that's how I'll go with Jack Driscoll, and you go with Cooper Rush. Yeah.
I only say it because I hate that the Philadelphia Eagles, who are 4-0, are not in a position to be second place, be 2-2 or 1-3. Like
so they beat in Cincinnati, whose offensive line is crap, and Joe Burrow did not play a good game that day. Who did they beat last week? Not the Commanders. Who did they beat in between?
Let me pull it up. They lost to the Bucs and have beat the Bengals, Giants, and Commanders. Yeah. All in very close games, except for the Commanders was a blowout.
The Giants are the worst 3-1 team. The Giants are the worst 3-1 team I've ever seen. And the Commanders are just bad. And like there's fans talking about benching Carson Wentz, which I want them to at least make it to the game in Philly before they bench him.
Yeah, because they definitely want to go after him again.
Well, I just want to see that reaction. He might want to be benched by that time, the vitriol that he will get at the link. Yeah, so and they get the Rams this week before they get us. So
if Cooper Rush is the quarterback this week and they beat the Rams, I think I'm gonna cry.
If he beats the Rams, do you think he starts against us, or do you think Dak is definitely back?
I think when Dak's healthy, Dak's back. I
again,
think
if it's Jerry Jones' decision.
Yeah, but I think Jerry Jones is just feeding into the fan base and the quarterback controversy that they think exists. He's just talking out of his ass. This is a guy who doesn't know how to take a damn selfie. So I don't trust his word on
a
radio show.
Before we finish off the Eagles, we'll do our pre-show for the Eagles Cardinals and another reunion. Zach Ertz going up against the Eagles for the first time. What are your quick thoughts on that game and what we're going to talk about on Friday?
I honestly think that Arizona's really bad. The word I hate to say it, but they're bad. And Kyler Murray's really not worth the money he got paid. I get it. He can scramble, he can run. Yeah, he is. It's cool to watch him run around and stuff, but he's really not efficient or effective at all. I get why they wanted to put things in his contract to make him work harder and stuff, because I would start to be concerned by year 3 when those guarantees are starting to wear down. What type of Kyler Murray are you going to get? I think we should be able to dominate the Arizona Cardinals. To be honest, depending on the injuries, depending on the circumstances with injuries, we should be able to beat them pretty bad. I think they're a really bad. What are they, 2-2 or 3-1? They're really not. They're not. They could easily be 0-4. They're really not that good of a football team.
The Raiders should have beat them. I don't know how the Raiders lost that game.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm talking too quickly on this, but based on 4 games, they're really not good.
They're not.
We should be easily going 5-0, but I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Oh no, it wouldn't surprise me if Cliff Kingsbury gets fired by the end of this year, but we'll see. All right, yeah. So I can't wait for Friday to talk about that. Hopefully, the Eagles talking about the Eagles potentially going 5-0 before the big game against Dallas, and it'll finally feel like a Dallas week because 2 teams that are the Eagles will at least be in first place by then, going into that week. If not a tie for first place. So we'll see. As always, thank you for listening or streaming with us here on the Kelly Green Hour. You can follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54. Follow the Painted Lines on Twitter and YouTube at the Painted Lines. Follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Edge of Philly Sports or EOP Sports. We'll be back this Friday to get you ready for the Philadelphia Eagles and Arizona Cardinals, the 4-0. Philadelphia Eagles, the only undefeated team left in the National Football League. Thank you for listening and watching the Kelly Green Hour.
You want Philly?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sanders patiently running. Sanders good